Jonathan Mitchell was the epitome of success. He was 45 years old, a well-respected lawyer, and the managing partner of one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. His charm and sharp mind had made him a prominent figure not just in the legal community, but among influential social circles. His wealth, his achievements, and his family all seemed to be perfectly in place. His wife, Emily, was a stunning woman in her early 40s, with shoulder-length brown hair, soft eyes, and an air of elegance that complemented Jonathan's polished image. They had 2 children, Sarah, a bright, ambitious teenager, and Luke, a quiet 11-year-old who was still finding his place in the world. Jonathan's life seemed perfect on the outside. A beautiful home in the best part of town, a thriving career, a beautiful wife, and 2 healthy children. Everything appeared flawless, a dream that everyone envied. No one could have predicted that beneath the surface, there was a hidden storm brewing. Jonathan, while outwardly charming, was hiding a dark secret. He was having an affair. The woman he was seeing, Miranda, was younger and more vibrant than Emily. She was a colleague at the firm, brilliant, ambitious, and full of energy. Jonathan had been seeing Miranda for nearly 6 months, unable to resist the pull of her allure. The affair had started innocently enough, with late-night work sessions turning into stolen moments of passion. Jonathan's marriage to Emily, which had been secure and loving, was now fraying at the edges, though Jonathan refused to admit it. The lies piled up, one after another, until he was living a double life. As he came home from work late one evening, the guilt weighed heavily on him. He had lied to Emily, telling her he was working late at the office. Emily, ever the supportive wife, never questioned him, trusting that he was doing what was necessary to provide for their family. But there were moments when she noticed the shift in his behavior. The late nights, the distracted looks, the absence of warmth. He had grown cold towards her, emotionally distant, and she felt it. Yet, despite all the signs, Emily never confronted him. She dismissed it as stress or work pressures. She had no idea that her perfect life was about to implode. One night, Jonathan received a call from Miranda. Their relationship had reached a point of no return. She wanted more, and she wasn't going to settle for being kept in the shadows anymore. Jonathan, however, was too deeply embedded in his perfect family life to end it all. The tension between his 2 worlds was rising. Miranda wanted him to choose her, and he could no longer keep pretending. But there was one problem: Emily. Emily had always trusted Jonathan, but with the subtle changes in his behavior, she started noticing the cracks in their perfect life. A few weeks earlier, she had discovered a strange text message on his phone. It was innocuous enough, but something about the tone made her uneasy. She thought back to the days when their marriage was full of life, full of laughter. But those days were fading, and the love they shared was being overshadowed by his growing distance. Miranda's call was the final straw for Jonathan. He was now at a crossroads, torn between the wife he had built a life with and the woman who made him feel alive again. But what Jonathan didn't know was that Emily had also started to suspect that something was wrong. That night, as Jonathan came home late again, he found Emily waiting for him in the living room. Her face was pale, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. She had been waiting for the right moment to confront him. "Jonathan," Emily said, her voice trembling but filled with an air of determination, "I know something is wrong. You haven't been yourself lately. Are you having an affair?" Jonathan froze. He couldn't believe it. She had found out. The guilt was overwhelming, but there was no turning back now. He had been living a lie for so long that now, when faced with the truth, he was forced to confront the consequences of his actions. "I'm sorry, Emily," Jonathan whispered, the words slipping out as if they were a confession he could no longer hold back. "I've been seeing someone else. It's not what I wanted, but it happened. And I'm so sorry." Emily stood up, her face a mixture of hurt and disbelief. She could feel the tears welling up, but she refused to cry. She had always believed in the man she married, and now he had shattered that belief. But instead of breaking down, Emily looked at him coldly. She had been betrayed, and she would not let him get away with it. The truth was out, and she was done pretending that everything was perfect. Jonathan's heart raced. This was the moment he feared, but in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the thought of Miranda. He had to make a decision, but he wasn't prepared for what would happen next. Emily walked out of the room, not saying another word. Jonathan sat alone, his mind racing. The weight of his betrayal crushed him, but in that moment, he didn't realize that the choices he had made, the lies he had told, were setting into motion something far worse than he could ever imagine. As Emily's footsteps faded, Jonathan picked up his phone. He dialed Miranda's number. He had to end it with Emily and start a new life with her. But when Miranda answered, the urgency in her voice made his blood run cold. "We need to talk, Jonathan. It's not just us anymore." Miranda's voice crackled over the line. "Something's happened. We're not safe." Jonathan's world began to collapse around him. Something was wrong, and he didn't know how to fix it. Little did he know, the web of deception, jealousy, and obsession he had spun would soon ensnare him in ways he couldn't escape. The storm was coming, and it would not only destroy Jonathan's perfect life, but also reveal the dangerous, hidden side of the man he had become. The following days were filled with a growing sense of dread. Jonathan's life, which had once seemed so carefully constructed, now hung by a fragile thread. Emily, devastated by his betrayal, found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about their marriage. How could she have been so blind? How could she have trusted him so completely? The shock was still fresh, but as the days wore on, something else began to surface, a suspicion that Emily could not ignore. The confrontation that night had been a turning point for Emily. She wasn't just dealing with the pain of betrayal. She was dealing with the realization that the man she had been married to for over a decade was not who she thought he was. As much as she wanted to move on, to leave the past behind, she couldn't. She had to find out the truth, not just for herself, but for the sake of their children. The lies were too deep, too damaging, and there was no way she could move forward without confronting them. Over the next few days, Emily started looking into Jonathan's life more closely. It wasn't easy. She had never been the type to snoop around, but the betrayal she had suffered left her with no other option. She dug through old files, emails, and messages that had once seemed unimportant. That's when she discovered something chilling. Jonathan's therapy sessions with his patients had been far more than just professional interactions. He had kept detailed notes on them, notes that revealed a side of him she had never seen before. Emily read through the notes with a growing sense of horror. These weren't just ordinary case notes. Jonathan had written about his patients in a way that was disturbingly intimate, detailing their emotional vulnerabilities and even their personal struggles. But as she dug deeper, she realized the truth. Jonathan had been using his patients as a means to control them, manipulate them, and push them toward his own twisted desires. He had become a predator, hiding behind the facade of a respected professional, and Emily had been blind to it all. The deeper she went, the more she uncovered. One of Jonathan's patients, a young woman named Evelyn, had been struggling with severe depression. She had come to Jonathan for help, but as Emily read Jonathan's notes, she learned that his help had been anything but therapeutic. He had manipulated Evelyn's emotions, using her vulnerabilities to bind her to him, making her believe that she couldn't survive without his guidance. The last entry Emily found in the journal read, "Evelyn has become completely dependent on me. I'll have her under my control soon." Emily's heart sank as she read those words. She had never known that Jonathan had been treating his patients this way. She had no idea that he was capable of something so sinister, something so far beyond the realm of normal professional behavior. She couldn't help but wonder how many others had fallen victim to Jonathan's manipulations. How many lives had he destroyed in his quest for control and power? It wasn't just Evelyn. As Emily continued to search through Jonathan's files, she found similar entries about other patients, women who had come to Jonathan seeking help, only to find themselves trapped in a web of psychological control. The more she uncovered, the more she realized the extent of Jonathan's dark world. He had been living a double life, one that no one had suspected, not even Emily. He had used his status, his charm, and his intelligence to exploit the vulnerable, to manipulate and control them, all while maintaining the image of a perfect, upstanding husband and father. Emily felt a sickening rage building inside her. She had trusted him, loved him, built a life with him, and all the while, he had been living a lie. Worse still, he had used the very trust she had placed in him to manipulate and control women who had been seeking help. She knew that she had to confront him again, but this time, it wouldn't be about confronting his infidelity. It would be about confronting the monster he had become. As Emily began to piece together the terrifying truth about Jonathan, she also realized that she was in danger. Jonathan had always been a master of manipulation, and now that his secret was out, she had no doubt that he would do everything in his power to silence her. The stakes were higher than ever before, and Emily knew that she couldn't back down. She had to expose him for the predator he truly was, even if it meant risking everything. As the weight of the truth settled in, Emily knew that the moment of reckoning was fast approaching. She could feel Jonathan's presence looming over her every step, like a shadow that she could never quite escape. The woman who had once trusted him, who had spent years by his side, was now grappling with the terrible reality that the man she loved was not just an unfaithful husband, but a calculated and manipulative predator. The stakes were higher than ever before. Emily couldn't afford to wait any longer. The evidence was mounting. Jonathan had to be stopped before his reach extended any further. Her hands trembled as she dialed Detective Lisa Harris's number. The first time they had spoken, the shock had been overwhelming. But now, with everything she had uncovered, Emily had become a woman on a mission. The truth was her weapon, and she wasn't going to back down. "Detective Harris, I need to meet," Emily said, her voice firm. "I've been expecting you to call," Lisa replied. "Let's meet tomorrow. Bring everything you've found." The next day, Emily sat across from Detective Harris, who carefully reviewed the journals and files she had gathered. As Lisa flipped through the documents, the expression on her face shifted. She was no longer the skeptical investigator who had initially doubted Emily's claims. Now, she was a woman fully aware of the dangerous depth of the situation. "Jonathan Edwards is a well-respected psychiatrist," Lisa said, scanning through the notes. "But this is beyond anything I expected. He's been playing a game, and the lives of these women are nothing more than pieces on his board." The detective's words sent a chill down Emily's spine. She had known it all along, but hearing someone else acknowledge the true horror of the situation made it feel even more real. Jonathan was a predator, and Emily had been living in the same house as the monster for years. Lisa's voice lowered as she continued. "We're going to need more evidence to build a case. But these journals, they're a solid start. I'll put together a task force, but we need to be cautious. Jonathan has resources. He's connected in ways we can't even begin to understand. This won't be easy." Emily nodded, her determination unshaken. She had come this far, and she wouldn't let fear stop her now. The thought of the women Jonathan had manipulated, the lives he had ruined, filled her with a deep, seething anger. She would not let him get away with it. Not anymore. "Do you think I can confront him?" Emily asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her resolve. "I need to see him face to face. I need to know that I'm not the only one who knows what he's done." Lisa considered it for a moment before responding. "I don't think it's safe. He's dangerous, Emily. This isn't just about you anymore. This is about bringing him down, and that means we have to stay focused. Don't let him control the narrative." But Emily had already made up her mind. There was no turning back. She had to confront him. She had to do it for herself, for the women he had destroyed, and for the sake of exposing the truth. That evening, as the sun began to set and cast long shadows across their home, Emily stood outside the door to Jonathan's study. Her heart raced as she took a deep breath. She knew this could be the moment that changed everything. This could be the moment she finally exposed the monster lurking behind Jonathan's charming smile. She knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. There was no mistaking it. Jonathan was in there. But he didn't respond. Emily's hands clenched into fists as she turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of a desk lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Jonathan sat at his desk, his back to her, flipping through a stack of papers. He looked up, but his expression remained neutral, almost detached, as if nothing had changed, as if he wasn't facing the woman he had betrayed. "Jonathan," Emily said, her voice steady but her insides trembling. "We need to talk." He didn't flinch, didn't show any sign of emotion. "About what?" His voice was calm, too calm. It was the voice of a man who believed he was untouchable. "About what you've done. About the lives you've destroyed. About the women you've manipulated," Emily said, stepping closer to the desk. Jonathan's cold brown eyes met hers. His expression didn't change, but something in his gaze shifted. "You're making a mistake, Emily. You don't know what you're saying. These women, they came to me for help. You don't understand. It was never like you think." Emily stepped forward again, this time leaning over the desk. "I know exactly what you are, Jonathan. I've read your journals. I've seen your notes. I've seen how you manipulate them, how you twist their pain into something you can control. And I know what you did to Evelyn. You killed her." Jonathan's jaw tightened, and for the first time, Emily saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same calculated, cold demeanor. "You have no proof. No one will believe you. You're just another angry wife, looking for an excuse to destroy me." Emily's hands shook as she reached into her bag, pulling out the flash drive. She placed it on the desk in front of him. "You're wrong. I have everything I need. The evidence, the witnesses. And now, it's your turn to pay for what you've done." Jonathan stared at the flash drive, his eyes narrowing as he realized what it was. He leaned back in his chair, his lips curling into a small smile. But it wasn't the smile of the man she had once loved. It was the smile of a man who knew he was about to lose everything. "You think you can take me down, Emily?" he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You've already lost. You'll never win. I'm not afraid of you anymore," Emily replied, her voice steady, her eyes unwavering. "This ends now." The silence between them was thick, almost suffocating. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Jonathan stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He walked toward the door, as if he were about to leave. But as he reached the doorframe, he turned to face Emily one last time. "You'll regret this," he said softly, almost too softly. Emily didn't flinch. "I don't think I will." As Emily sat in the silence of Jonathan's study, the weight of her actions pressed heavily on her chest. The confrontation had been inevitable, but now that it had happened, she couldn't shake the cold feeling that lingered. She had exposed him, but the danger wasn't over. Jonathan was a man with power, influence in the community, connections in the highest circles, and an ego that rivaled his intelligence. He was the kind of man who never thought he'd be caught. But Emily was different now. She wasn't the helpless wife who had once looked the other way. She had seen the monster behind the mask, and she wasn't going to stop until the truth was exposed. But what would it take to finally bring him down? After the confrontation, Emily felt as though she was walking a thin line between triumph and danger. Jonathan had been cornered, yes, but that didn't mean he was done. Far from it. The shock on his face as she confronted him with the evidence had been real. For a moment, she saw him falter. But it had been a fleeting moment. Now, Jonathan was calculating his next move, just as he always had. He would find a way to wriggle free, just as he had done so many times before. He wouldn't let his perfect world come crumbling down without a fight. Days passed in a blur. Emily spent every moment working with Detective Lisa Harris, continuing to provide everything she had gathered: the journals, the tapes, the flash drives. She didn't feel relief. She felt anxiety. There was still so much to uncover, so many loose ends. Jonathan's years of manipulation had created an intricate web, and Emily was only beginning to untangle it. Then came the call. Detective Lisa Harris's voice was tight with urgency. "Emily, we need to talk. We found something you need to see. It's about Jonathan." Emily's pulse quickened. She had known the investigation would eventually lead to more shocking revelations, but nothing could have prepared her for what was coming next. The following day, Emily met with Detective Harris at the precinct. Lisa had a folder in her hands, and as she opened it, Emily's stomach twisted with dread. Inside were several photographs of Jonathan, but not just any photographs. These images were taken during his sessions with some of the women who had been reported missing. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she looked at the pictures. There was Jonathan, standing beside a woman, his hand on her shoulder, a smile on his face. In one photo, the woman's eyes were wide with fear, a clear contrast to Jonathan's calm demeanor. In another, the woman appeared dazed, her body stiff, her posture unnaturally controlled. The photos spoke volumes without a single word. "These were taken at a conference he attended about 3 years ago," Lisa explained. "We didn't realize it at the time, but we've tracked down witnesses who remember Jonathan interacting with these women. And the timing is suspicious. A few months after these sessions, each of them went missing." Emily's heart sank. She had known Jonathan was dangerous, but this was something else entirely. He hadn't just been manipulating these women emotionally. He had been controlling them physically as well. His manipulations were systematic, calculated. He knew exactly what he was doing. And now, he was going to try and cover his tracks again. Lisa continued, her voice low. "We also found more journals. Ones that Jonathan kept hidden from us. These entries are much darker than the ones we've already reviewed. He wrote about specific women he'd targeted, making detailed notes about how he'd reached them, their weaknesses, their desires. He referred to them as projects." "Projects," Emily repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. The word echoed in her mind, sending chills down her spine. "Projects," Lisa confirmed. "And in these new entries, he even mentioned some of the women he's killed. He didn't just manipulate them. He played them, pushed them to the brink, and then discarded them like nothing. Some of them weren't even dead when he left them. They were broken." The realization hit Emily hard. Jonathan hadn't just crossed the line. He had created a game for himself, one that no one else could see. A twisted, deadly game where the lives of vulnerable women were nothing but pawns to be controlled, toyed with, and ultimately destroyed. "But what do we do now?" Emily asked, her voice shaky. She could feel her resolve starting to slip. The magnitude of what they had uncovered was overwhelming. "How do we prove it?" "We keep digging," Lisa said firmly. "We have enough to charge him, but there's still more to find. We need to connect the dots between these women, their disappearances, and Jonathan. And we need witnesses. But we're getting closer. I promise you, Emily, will take him down." But the clock was ticking. Jonathan wasn't going to wait around for his downfall. In fact, Emily had started to notice strange things happening around the house. Objects were out of place. Files she thought she had locked away had been moved. And then there were the phone calls, anonymous numbers, dead air when she picked up. It was clear that Jonathan was watching, waiting for his opportunity to strike back. The tension in Emily's life had escalated to a level she never thought possible. She was no longer just a victim of his manipulation. She had become the target. Jonathan had never expected her to uncover his secrets. Now, he was lashing out, trying to regain control. One afternoon, as Emily sat in her study, flipping through the evidence, her phone rang. It was Lisa again. "We've got a problem," Lisa said, her voice urgent. "Jonathan's gone. He's disappeared." Emily's stomach churned. "What do you mean, gone?" "We've tracked his movements. He knew we were closing in. We've got teams looking for him, but he's vanished. No trace. It's like he's gone into hiding. And I'm afraid he might have gone after you." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She knew Jonathan was dangerous, but now he was a desperate man. And desperate men would do anything to protect themselves. "I'm not going to hide," Emily said firmly. "I've come this far. I'm not going to let him get away with it." Lisa paused. "Stay safe. We'll find him. But keep your guard up. He's not going to go down easily." Days passed, and the search for Jonathan intensified. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that he was getting closer, that he was watching her every move. She could feel the walls closing in, and the fear that had once been buried deep inside her was beginning to creep back to the surface. Then, one night, as Emily prepared for bed, there was a knock at the door. Her breath caught in her throat. Who could it be at this hour? She opened the door slowly, and standing there was a man she had never seen before. His face was shadowed, his posture rigid. "I have information about Jonathan," the man said, his voice low and urgent. "You need to listen to me. He's coming for you." The tension in Emily's life reached an unbearable crescendo. The man she had once loved, trusted, and built a life with was no longer just a distant figure in her past. He was a looming specter, watching her every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. The walls were closing in, and every instinct she had screamed that she needed to stay ahead of him, that she couldn't stop now. Not when she had come so far. But how far would Jonathan go to maintain his perfect facade? Would he stop at nothing to silence her? The man who had carefully crafted his own image, that of a respected psychiatrist, a loving father, a devoted husband, had been unmasked as a predator, a liar, a manipulator. And now, that mask was slipping. There was nowhere for him to hide anymore. The web of lies he had woven for years had finally caught up with him, and his reign of terror was on the brink of collapse. But Emily knew she had to be careful. Jonathan wasn't just a man who had been exposed. He was a man desperate to keep his control, no matter the cost. The power he had over his patients, over his family, had been his lifeblood. And now that it was slipping away, Emily could feel the desperation in the air. She could almost hear it, the quiet ticking of the clock, the minutes slipping by until Jonathan would either be caught or make one final, catastrophic move. It was late in the evening when Emily received the phone call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was breathless, frantic. "Emily, it's Lisa. You need to get out of the house. Now." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What's going on? Is he here?" Lisa's voice crackled with urgency. "We don't know, but we've traced a phone call. It came from your home. Someone inside has been trying to sabotage the investigation. We think Jonathan's been in contact with someone. We believe he's back in town. And he's close." The fear in Lisa's voice was enough to send a chill down Emily's spine. Jonathan wasn't just running. He was preparing to make his move. He was close, closer than they realized. And the idea that someone inside her own home might be helping him sent her mind spiraling. Who could it be? Emily slammed the phone down, her mind racing. Was it one of the staff? One of their colleagues? She couldn't trust anyone. Not anymore. In a panic, Emily grabbed her bag and keys, her hands trembling as she rushed toward the door. But as her fingers gripped the door handle, she froze. A thought hit her like a wave. She couldn't run, not now. Not when she was so close to seeing this through. But then what? What if Jonathan found her first? What if the danger wasn't over? The hours dragged on like days. Emily didn't sleep. She couldn't. Instead, she spent her time planning her next move, carefully considering every detail. If Jonathan was indeed in town and watching her, she couldn't afford to make a single misstep. She finally contacted Lisa again, and the two women discussed the plan. The police had upped their presence, and Jonathan's name was now public knowledge. But even with the force of the law behind her, Emily knew there was something Jonathan had that they didn't: control. He had always been able to manipulate situations to his advantage, and now, in this final moment, she wasn't sure what he would do next. As the hours ticked down, Emily felt the weight of the past few months pressing on her chest. She had uncovered everything. She had confronted Jonathan. But now, she had to make sure he was stopped, once and for all. At dawn, as the first rays of light broke through the window, Emily heard it, the sound of footsteps outside. Soft at first, then louder. Then the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. Jonathan was here. With a sense of calm she hadn't known she was capable of, Emily rose to her feet and grabbed the evidence she had prepared. The journals, the tapes, the photos, everything that would prove Jonathan's guilt. She knew she couldn't let him out of her sight now. If he was caught, this could all be over. But if he wasn't, she might be his next target. She heard the door open with a soft creak. The hallway light flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Emily held her breath, then slowly stepped toward the door. She peered through the crack and saw Jonathan standing at the far end of the hallway, his face twisted into a cruel smile. "Hello, Emily," he said coldly. "I knew you'd come for me eventually." Emily's heart hammered in her chest. It was him, the man who had controlled her life for so long, who had manipulated everyone around him, was now standing right before her. But this time, she wasn't afraid. This time, she knew the truth, and she had nothing left to lose. "You're finished, Jonathan," she said, her voice steady. "You've been caught, and I'm not backing down." Jonathan stepped forward, his face a mask of disbelief. "Caught? You think this is over, Emily? You have no idea what you're dealing with." "I know exactly what I'm dealing with," Emily replied, walking toward him. "You're nothing more than a coward, hiding behind your patience, manipulating people into doing your bidding. You were never the man you pretended to be, and now it's time for the world to know who you really are." His expression faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. "You think you've won? The system's broken. You'll never get justice. No one will believe you." Emily stood her ground. "You'll see." And with that, the door behind Jonathan burst open. The police flooded into the room, surrounding him in an instant. He was caught, finally. He had nowhere to run. As Jonathan was handcuffed and led away, his face twisted in rage, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The truth had been revealed. Jonathan's empire of manipulation and deceit had crumbled, and he was finally going to face the consequences of his actions. The story of Jonathan Edwards is one of deception, manipulation, and ultimately, justice. Emily's journey to uncover the truth about her husband's dark secrets is a testament to the power of perseverance and bravery in the face of evil. But the question remains, what happens when the perfect facade is torn away? Can justice ever truly undo the damage that's been done? And how do we truly know who the people in our lives really are? Do you think Jonathan got what he deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, click on the notification bell for more gripping true crime stories.